You have to ask yourself an honest question. Do you need somebody to motivate you before you train? Does your girlfriend have to convince you to put the video games down for you to put them down? Do you need to hear, or do you need to be given something from outside for you to end up doing any of the things which are required for the basic premise of survival? And a lot of people will say, well, you know, it doesn't matter if I don't have that much help, or it doesn't matter if I don't try that hard because I want to be the average man. Average is simply failing so similarly to the people around you that you don't realize you failed at all. Everyone else around you is failing the same way, so you don't see it as failure. You see it as average. But if the bar of the average person's life is being constantly reduced, it doesn't matter if you're an average person because you've moved into loserdom. In the 1950s, the average man had a good house, he had a wife who loved him, he had children, he had a nice car on the drive, he was the king of his castle. Nowadays, the average man can't pay his bills, divorced wife, his kids don't listen to him, he's not respected, he's in debt. Now, he's still average, but you can't compare him to the man from the 1950s who was average. The social standing for average is being pushed further and further down. The average man's life is going to get worse and worse and worse. So claiming that you're average is no longer enough. In fact, for you to have a life like the average man had in the 1950s, a nice big house, multiple cars on the drive, a woman who adores you, who will birth your children, who obeys you, who stays at home and cooks and cleans, children who love you and would obey you and fear you when you raise your voice, who adopt your creeds and your worldviews. For you to have the average man's life today, you're now an exceptional man.
Yeah, you need 150K a year to get that.
150K, minimum.
A minimum.
So the average man's life is actually an exceptional man's life, depending on the time you look at it, because they're pushing down the average man's life further and further. You're not allowed to be an average man anymore and sit around waiting for the government or your girlfriend or your mom or your friends or anybody else to take care of you and convince you to not be an idiot. You think being average is fine because you think that means kids, wife, job, and your legacy continues. But average means average. And you don't get to define the definition of average, your government does. The average today is a divorced wife paying child support with 1 or 2 kids who've been programmed by the school and the ex-wife to hate you. This is exactly where you're gonna end up if you want to stay the average person. Average men are cuck slaves that will be useless tomorrow because they'll be replaced by AI. You're gonna watch helplessly while your wife feeds your 11-year-old son hormone pills and the state forces you to watch it as inclusivity training. You're gonna ask God why this has happened. He's gonna respond to you with very simple wisdom. An average life led to an average outcome, and the average man's outcome for the future is dire. You don't want the average man's life now, and you certainly don't want it in 30 years from now. You want it in the top 0.001%, and you must act accordingly. You need to get rich now. I don't know how else to put it in simple language. You need to panic, stop sleeping, feel nervous, get worried, and get rich now, before the schism is so large in the universe that the wormhole closes and brokies cannot escape perpetual and never-ending slavery for their entire dynasty of their bloodline. The average man, who's always been a slave but has been afforded some luxuries, is soon going to be stripped of all luxuries and be left as nothing other than a slave purely.